Let's start with a very specific question. Do you have opinions about the what is called the no-fault divorce? Like the divorce where you can say, oh, we just disagree. Some people say it shouldn't exist because then it's kind of a cop-out. What do you think?
Yeah, I think it's in a situation where there's two people in a marriage, there's always going to be subjectivity, and it's really hard to say what the correct story is. There's that saying, there's always three sides to a story. Side A, side B, and then the truth. And I think that's probably the intention behind no-fault divorce. It's really hard to get to the crux of what the issue is. And there are more clear-cut examples where, for example, you have, infidelity. There, in my opinion, should be some level of nuance to the law for specific cases like infidelity. But in general, I would say I agree with it.
So, in principle, if to be married with someone is it a promise to you?
To me, it is a promise, yes,
Okay.
legally and...
So if either or both decide to break the promise, and that's still a bad thing, I guess. I know I've heard of divorce parties. Ooh, celebrate your freedom. Maybe if the other person is a serial killer, but otherwise, why would you have a reason to celebrate? Is that a personal failure to some extent?
I'd say in today's society, we always try to view things positively. I've had people in my lives that no matter what happens, they're going to view it as a positive. And I think the example you just gave is an example of that. It's someone who's gone through a tough process and is looking to celebrate.
Sorry to interrupt. Do you see something pathological, or that's fine to be like that? Like
I don't personally. Right, I agree. I personally don't find it positive, and I haven't been in that position, but I don't think I would celebrate it. It's I think a coping mechanism is the term I was looking for.
If I would decide to marry, and if she agrees, that would be the responsibility of me to know enough to tell that I wouldn't have such a big surprise that would get me to want to divorce. Or even if I want to divorce, I just don't because I made a promise. So unless she is a serial killer, I might be better off to stick with it. I think that's the concept of marriage in the first place, to use those shackles to keep you there even when you don't want to be there, because hard times will follow.
Yes, like you said, there are extreme examples, and we do need to acknowledge people change over time. When you get married, typically you're in the first third of your life, whether you're 25, 35, even 45.
But don't you have stake on how your partner changes if you live in the same house?
You do. There are things that are out of your control, but I would say in general, it's a collaborative change. And ideally, you're changing together and not going separate ways. Of course, like I say, there's always nuance and there's caveats, but in principle, I agree with you. I'd say it's a lifelong commitment and you should both try your very best to honor it.
How do you feel about the concept of possessiveness? So, for example, if somebody would say, okay, this is my husband, my wife, you're mine, I feel I practically own a part of you. Do you feel it for yourself in that way?
I think there's always going to be some element of that. When there's love, there's jealousy, but I think that it's generally negative. I think you need to be able to go forward in life but be your own people, and there needs to be a level of trust. Of course, that trust may be broken, and that is up to every couple to figure out how to navigate forward from there. But in general, I'd say it's not positive.
Would you take up the responsibility of your partner telling you, you know what, in some issues, I don't trust myself. I trust you to dictate to me what to do more than I trust myself. I see this practically happening in many couples, including my parents. So I know that in some domains of decision making, I'm a complete idiot, and I want to give away freedom to choose, but also responsibility at the same time. And hopefully there will be a relatively balanced, it doesn't have to be completely balanced. You can see in some couples, one person takes all the decisions, or most of the decisions. But do you find practical this delegation of decision making, even including deep personal matters, in which case you give away yourself to another person, but you trust them enough to be authoritarian to your life? Does it make sense what they ask?
Yeah, it does make sense. I think in general, couples should supplement each other. And it's natural for one person to be stronger in certain areas than another. And so I think it's okay to delegate some percentage of responsibilities between the two, and it's up to the couple. I think, as with everything, moderation is best, and it shouldn't be that one couple is making 90 to 100% of the decisions.
But moderation in the balance. But let me give you an example that may feel a little bit extreme or uncomfortable. Let's say it's one of the topics that you're very confident that you know better than your partner.
Yeah.
And she says, no, absolutely no.
Yeah.
Would you feel justified to do it anyway, or basically to force the decision just because you know that maybe in the future she will be, you know what, it's good that you didn't let me do it, just like a child?
Yeah, I think conflict resolution is a part of every good marriage, and I may think I'm better than position to give advice on a certain topic than my wife or make a certain decision, but that may not be true. Maybe she is better. For me personally, I would, if we can't come to a compromise, relent and give her, let her have the opportunity to prove her position first. And unless it is, life-threatening, I think that we would learn from it and move forward from it.
So you wouldn't do something against your will in the mindset, oh, you will thank me later because I know better. You wouldn't act like that? Or
if we disagreed on a topic that we both felt like we were experts in and equally positioned to decide, I would go with her suggestion.
No, you can see she's emotional, but that's her choice. Would you circumvent, like in a general public dispute, that would be illegal, but you're married, let's say.
Okay.
You get my point? The concept of ownership, almost like you just do the thing because you're confident enough that the next day she will be like, good that you didn't let, how many times somebody says to a friend, thank you that you didn't let me do what I wanted to do. You know what I mean?
But I think I do, but how do I know her option isn't the right one, I guess? What if I think I'm right and she thinks she's right, and then...
That's my question. Are there cases where you feel that you would know and then you would act that way?
I don't think I would.
Okay.
I think we're equals.
So the answer is, this is not the relationship you want to have with someone, maybe.
Right. I think we're
Too
equals.
much responsibility on your part.
I think for me and my wife, there aren't situations where she would be so adamant about something that's so clearly wrong, where I am morally or legally.
What about you as well?
I think we're both fairly balanced in that sense. We don't really have a strongly opposing viewpoints where we would have to do conflict resolution in that sense. I just can't think of an example right now.
Okay, because I can think of many. Like one common thing is women not allowing men to buy a little gadget, a little toy, even if it's their own money.
Yeah.
No, you're not fucking buying this. And then he's like, but I really want it.
Yeah.
You have a nice watch. Maybe she's
thank
angry.
you.
I don't know.
She got me this watch actually. Thank you. And in hindsight, we both feel we went through stages where we overcommitted to materialistic possessions and don't feel the same way. But I think that's part of evolving as people, and we haven't had that specific example.
It's 10 minutes. I want to respect.
Yeah, maybe a couple more. I that question was a tough one.
I always like to push people to their comfort zone.
I appreciate it.
I think it makes for interesting conversation because my goal is not only to get good material, but then the persons when they walk home, they're like,
right.
Well, like
I think it's one of those things when you think more about it, you may come up with a better answer. But live, I can't think of a better answer. We just managed to resolve conflicts, and we just haven't really had one that holds us back too much.
But what I would argue is that she or you might want that forfeit of responsibility, but also forfeit of power in domains that have been established that one person can make better decisions.
Yeah, I think there's always situations where we test our partners and see if they read our mind or on the same wavelength. But I think it's better to be direct, and communication is really the most important thing about a relationship.
Do you think you want more kids, or?
We are probably going to only have the one. It's something we discuss very frequently, and we both don't feel strongly about a second child. Although we both have siblings, we think that our son will be okay.
Some disadvantages to having a second child?
I think for my wife, it's the physical disadvantages of having a child. It's never easy to recover. There's always also that emotional recovery period that often gets overlooked after having a child. And the older you are, the more difficult both of those things are. And then, of course, there's the financial element. It's not cheap to raise a child, and it's a socioeconomic issue we see around the world. We see low fertility rates in Japan and Korea, and even the Western countries. You're seeing an uptick in.
What's the socioeconomic point? I didn't get it.
It's that you need to have a certain amount of time and money and resources in order to raise a child the way a young couple might. And also for the parents themselves, they may have their own priorities that are more challenging when you have a child. That's something.
Would you say your son is your number one priority, or it goes together with other things?
Number one.
Okay.
Yeah.
I'm happy to hear that. Yeah. Awesome.
It does lend he is number one and always will be, but it does make you sacrifice. And for me personally, I've been okay with those sacrifices, my wife, but everyone's different, and it may be difficult to sacrifice your hobbies and your time and your resources to bring up your child. And I respect people who don't want to have children in that sense.
I don't, because I don't see it as a sacrifice as much as an investment.
Yes.
What is an investment?
Speaking about East Asian cultures, an investment is a long-term investment that your child will take care of you. There's also the element of legacy. People like to leave legacies. But I think generations have changed, and there really is no real obligation for children to take care of their parents.
Actually, that's a very good point. I didn't even think about it. I would say you invest to create something that is out of you, that is not you, not even thinking about when you get old. Maybe I talk romantic bullshit because I'm not a parent, so maybe I'm delusional to some extent.
No, I'll tell you that's how I feel too. As
But
someone.
like when you create a human being, I know it's a very simplistic logic, but if you can have two, it's another human being. And if you can afford it, I think it's almost a no-brainer. If you're well off, again, that's kind of personal opinion. I don't want to shame people who don't think like that. But my default mode of thinking is, if you can afford kids, have as many as you can.
Yeah.
I don't know.
Yeah.
But I respect what you say, but
Yeah.
I disagree. Like, I wouldn't buy I want to have my hobbies. No, don't do your hobbies. Do the kids,
Yeah. It's a valid point. I think there's always limits, and everyone's limit's different. For us, the limit's 1, but for someone, the limit might be 5. It's all relative and subjective. Being able to afford having children is different for every person, and you may want to send your kid to private school and say, I can't afford having a child unless I send them to private school. But for 99.9% of the world, that isn't the barometer for being able to afford a child. It's basic needs like shelter and food, and so it's relative. And it is something that I don't think there's a correct answer for, but if you're asking me, I would say it's to give your child the life that you want, even if that does include some level of luxuries. And yeah, I think for everyone that's different.
Thank you so much.
No problem. Yeah, that was